podcast presents.
Welcome to the EBS podcast about nanodegrees. My name is Jim Seltenrijk and I'm the head of Master Studies here at the Estonian Business School. Joining me today is Ava Lauren, who will be talking about her nanodegree Global Megatrends. Ava, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
We would love to hear more. What is this Global Megatrends all about?
So this fall, we're going to start with a new nanodegree here at EBS called Global Megatrends. So when we talk about megatrends, essentially what they are these sort of global long-term processes that are very slow to form, but then have a major impact on nearly every aspect of our lives. So a good example here would be climate change. And essentially what we're trying to do with this nano is to kind of expose our future business leaders to these different types of disruptive forces that are changing the business landscape today. And as part of the course, we want to explore 4 different megatrends, but also the ways in which different kind of companies and business leaders around the world are addressing them. So I'll briefly cover some of the megatrends we looked at, just to kind of give you some insights. So when it comes to the 4 megatrends we look at, the first is climate change and environmental degradation. It's just one of the, you can't get over it. It's impacting every aspect of our lives. So it is creating challenges for businesses. But what we want to stress as part of this course as well is it is creating a lot of new opportunities, especially, with this transition towards a more resource efficient and green economy. You can create new business models, new opportunities. We're also looking at technology. So technology is the quintessential original megatrend, and it's been kind of disrupting business since the beginning of history. But what is changing is just the kind of the speed of technological breakthroughs. And I think it's one of these topics where we think we know some parts of it, we know bits and bobs, but we really don't understand the real scope of it and the uncertainties that it presents. We're talking about the new frontiers like space and all of that. So with the third megatrend we look at is kind of rapid urbanization and demographic changes. And when it comes to urbanization, especially in an Estonian context, it's one of these megatrends we tend to overlook because Estonians love nature. We think that, cities are small, everything is great. But rapid urbanization is actually one of the biggest megatrends we see because more than half of the people in the world are living in cities. 1.5 million people are moving to cities every week, and 85% of the world's GDP is in cities. I was just kind of before we met, I wanted to see that how does Estonia's GDP compare to some of the cities? And for instance, Berlin's GDP, just the cities, is 5 times bigger than Estonia's. So the kind of the economic might will be in the kind of urban agglomerations. And the kind of 4th megatrend we want to address is what we call global economic power shifts, because this is fundamentally kind of altering some of the kind of I would say geopolitical dynamics. But so, for instance, what we mean by that is kind of a change of economic center of gravity from G7 countries like the United States to E7 countries or the emerging 7, China, India, but also countries like Mexico, Turkey. And this is not just a kind of a matter of geopolitics, but it is going to have a fundamental kind of impact on the ways in which corporations and businesses function. So how are Estonian businesses going to change if they need to work with Brazilian corporations or Indian corporations? You kind of need to start thinking about those things. And the 5th module of the Nano kind of brings all these different megatrends together. We call it Alternative Global Futures. And the aim there is to give our students a specific kind of scenario and foresight planning skills to cope better with these and kind of uncertainties and how to kind of address them, actually.
Okay, wow. This is a lot of information to unpack how you're going to deliver this in only 9 weeks. But
it's a crash course.
Exactly. So can you tell us a little bit more? So you're talking about within the courses, you're talking about the trends, but also how are you going to make this applicable for our students? Like what can they take away from the courses?
So one of the things, obviously, with megatrends, because we're looking at these kind of, as the name says, where, it brings in the macroeconomic element of it. But what we're kind of trying to do is to show how companies are already dealing with these megatrends. Because, in contrast to some of these wildcard events like COVID-19 that just came out of nowhere, a lot of these megatrends have been in place for a while, and companies around the world have been addressing them already. And one thing which I think is interesting with this course and what we're trying to do as well is different parts of the world are kind of addressing these challenges in different ways. So, for instance, green economy in Asia can mean something very different than it does in Europe. And I think by learning from the experiences of practitioners and companies in different parts, we can really encourage innovation as well. Because, if you analyze what you see here and there, what would be the most applicable solution for your company, for your business? So this is where we're trying to, with each of these megatrends, kind of give a space and a chance for students to kind of bring the macroeconomic to your own level.
All right. Okay. So you try to provide the bigger picture, but then also put it down to the local or like the organizational level where
Absolutely.
you can benefit from these megatrends or at least adjust to them in time so that you are not falling behind. That's really a really interesting approach, and I really like that you have these many different levels. That brings me to the question, so we're talking about megatrends, obviously. What are the megatrends, or you have selected the four?
Mm-hmm.
So why are these four so in particular so relevant right now? I understand, yes, technology, as you said, it has been changing businesses since day one, but climate change for an Estonian small organization, why should I even care? Here in Estonia, there's a lot of nature. It seems that CO2 emissions are not too bad. So why should I even care as a...
It is one of these kind of tricky things with megatrends. We sort of know they're there, but they're always in the background. But I think actually at the moment is the best time to start thinking about these, partly because when we look in the business landscape more broadly, nearly all businesses are kind of rethinking and restructuring their business operations and strategies, partly due to the pandemic, which has been kind of catalyzing that process. But obviously with these megatrends, they're, sooner or later, they're going to impact your business. Even if this climate change is not felt perhaps here, but it's going to be, felt down the supply chain. Global business is so interconnected. So it's going to hit you sooner or later. And if you're in a process of kind of restructuring, rethinking your entire strategies, it's a good time to, first of all, raise your awareness about these megatrends and how they can, begin to impact your specific business or company. But also, how can you then kind of develop these resilient strategies that, on a kind of try to deal with the COVID-19 impact now, but then also with megatrends. Because I think one of the things I want to stress as well, that when it comes to these megatrends, their impact is actually much bigger in the long term than the COVID-19 pandemic's impact. It has been an enormous economic shock, but the kind of might of megatrends and the fact that they impact every aspect of our lives is just, you can't underestimate that.
Okay, really fascinating and really interesting to see.
But it's not to scare anyone. That's the thing. There is so much opportunity.
There's opportunities there, exactly, and we need to be aware of this, even in a local context. Who's your target audience? So who of our listeners / viewers should be thinking right now, hey, I should be joining this nano?
So obviously the kind of, because when it comes to these macroeconomic and geostrategic forces, then anyone who's working with strategy or just planning in general in businesses, for them it is relevant. But I would argue as well that I always encourage people who are only entering into world of business, even startup leaders, all of that, because they need to take into account these sort of trends. It's very easy to focus just on your tasks at the hand, like what is happening, but you need to have this kind of general awareness. So obviously it's easy to kind of push for people working with the kind of strategic area, but also I would encourage future entrepreneurs to kind of be aware with these sort of topics.
So that from day one, you can take this into account when you're planning your strategy. Okay.
Because, you can't discount that, because if your business is going to be successful, you're hoping that it's going to last for a while, and it needs to be resilient to these sort of shifts that are happening. And the other thing, like we talked about the opportunities, there are so many opportunities in there. So if you need to get a good idea what you should be doing, kind of hopefully we'll give you ideas around that as well.
It can be the perfect moment to pivot with your startup into a new trend. Okay, that is absolutely like so very broad target audience that anybody doing something with business can benefit one way or another, especially when it comes to strategic decision making and a little bit longer term planning.
Yeah. And this is if you're starting a new business, this is what you need to, if you need to pitch your idea, pitch it to the kind of context that's relevant to the entire world.
Exactly, yeah. So global megatrends, does that also include a global teaching team?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to these 5 modules, what we have tried to do is, first of all, we have different kind of lectures and experts working on each of the modules, because obviously we're covering so different topics. So we want to make sure that the people teaching it are kind of on top of their game. But part of that, what we were trying to do as well, is to kind of try to pair up different lectures, but also bring in guest lecturers and kind of practitioners. So for instance, if we look at the 5th module, which deals with scenario planning, so this is led by the EBS's director, Professor Meelis Kitsing, who has long experience in kind of scenario planning and forecasting in general, has worked with the Foresight Centre at the Estonian Parliament. So he already can bring in a lot of kind of experience in the field, but he is pairing up with a guest lecturer from Berlin, who's a communication expert, who has who's working with different kind of corporations who are trying to communicate change. Because that's an important part of this megatrends as well, is kind of, it's great to learn about new things, but how do you make them into actionable steps as well? How do you kind of then try to turn the acquired knowledge into something more actionable? So we have tried to do that, but also with kind of guest lecturers, bring in different company, different kind of institutions. Globally, because that's that you can't address global megatrends without the international element. Yeah.
All right, that is very, very interesting and very, very nicely composed within this nano. My last question would be, if you had to convince our listeners even more, what would be the 1 or 2 reasons that you would say this is why you should join this nano? So I understand, yes, I learn about the trends, so I learn about how can I apply these things, but are there any other reasons or any deeper understandings that you would like to share?
Well, one of the things I want to kind of return to is perhaps this notion that I think we're currently contemplating a lot of change in our lives in general, just because of this COVID-19 situation. But I think what we're hoping to do with this kind of course in general is to provide a platform to really explore these things. Because I think we need to address these megatrends today, but in our kind of work lives, in our day-to-day lives, we don't have a chance to do that. We don't have a chance to kind of develop this best resilience strategy for the future. And we're hoping to provide a kind of opportunity for people to do that. And I would argue that, with the megatrends, you can anticipate these sort of changes. And this is why I deeply believe that business leaders also must address these changes, because you can already see the impact, the possibilities, how is the climate change changing the world, or how is this kind of technology and the gap between opportunities there. You need to kind of consider these things to not only make better business decision, but to improve the kind of your own life and the world in general.
Okay, that is very, very nice. Before I wrap it up, I would like to ask you a little bit about nanos in general, because this is now the second time that we have you here.
Yes.
But also in the current semester, the spring semester, you're teaching a nano. How's this experience? Does nano education differ from regular master level education?
I have obviously I can kind of talk from the teaching perspective, and one of the things I've really kind of enjoyed as part of this Nanodegrees is the chance to focus on a topic and go in depth. Because I think generally with other courses, it is one of these things that, you try to cover so many different topics. So as a teacher, it's very enjoyable to go in depth into a topic. But I can see it also from the students' perspective, that is kind of, they have a chance to kind of delve into an idea. Because I think otherwise it's bit of this, bit of that, and you're running a race. But I think the Nanodegrees have really kind of provided a platform to go in depth and kind of explore certain ideas. So I think, as a teacher, I found it very enjoyable. I hope students have found the kind of courses enjoyable as well.
Okay, well, that's really good to hear, and I'm sure that the students actually also really enjoyed this nanos. And I think what you're saying is very true, especially also for global megatrends, that like we can at least go in depth. So rather than having to scratch the surface in a couple of lectures, we can really go into depth with these topics.
Absolutely.
Ave, thank you so much for joining us today. For our listeners, the nano degree about global megatrends will be available to you in the autumn of 2021, and we're looking forward to have you there.